Hello and welcome to our weekly devotional from the Gideons International in Canada and Shareware Global. My name is Chris Long and I'm very excited today to share with you part one of a four-part series presented by our president, Dr. Alan Anderson. Our prayer is that God would use this to encourage you in your relationship with him and that we would ignite and fuel a passion in your heart to share the gospel with others. Stay tuned at the end of Dr. Al's devotional as I'm going to share one simple step that you can take to effectively introduce others to Jesus. Dr. Al, take it away.
Hello there. I'd like to take this opportunity to just share a little bit about some reflections on the Lord's Prayer that I've had recently. So my hope and intention is to take 4 times and walk through the Lord's Prayer and give a little bit of commentary on 4 sections. I'm hoping that in these troubled times that we have, that these messages can be helpful for all of us. So beginning in the Lord's Prayer, this is found in Matthew chapter 6, and just take the very first line, Our Father in heaven. Now, I've had a lot of reflections on this passage over the years, partly because I came from a tough family background. And I wouldn't say that my relationship with my father was everything that I was hoping that it would be. There were some hard aspects to it. And so, the concept of father, it doesn't come with an immediate association of benevolence and someone who's working hard for my benefit or looking out for me in a profound way. So I came from that family. I also came from the era where men were supposed to be strong, silent types. I'll say the principal example of that growing up for me was John Wayne. Don't say much. You work hard, you get the job done. In terms of anything like emotions or emotional expression, well, I suppose anger was the only one that was really allowed. Any kind of sadness or weakness or even expressing affections was frowned upon. It wasn't considered manly. And so I grew up in that kind of era. I was trained early on in science and math. I was going to be a scientist, objective, unemotional. And so when I got married, and early when my wife informed me that she was pregnant and we were expecting our first, I wondered how I would react to this new little one joining our family. I know that fathers are supposed to love their children and be sensitive to them. And in that time, that would have been the early 80s or mid 80s, a lot more affection and appreciation and communication was being expected from fathers. And so how was I going to react to this new infant joining our household? So, we went through the pregnancy. I attended the breathing classes. I was going to be a helpful coach and, all of that. And so then there were signs that the pregnancy was coming to an end. Labor pains, false labor. We had 3 false labor before the real one. One time, actually profound enough that we went to the hospital and then came home without a baby, which is very disappointing for expectant parents. And, at 2 weeks overdue, past the original projected due date, my wife was getting quite eager to be done with carrying the baby in that way. And so finally the day came, severe labor pains, late into the evening, and we went to the hospital. and had a 48-hour labor. The problem was my wife stalled just on the verge of where it would be safe to deliver, and we just were hung up there for many, many hours. So 2 overnights. And by that time, we were exhausted, emotional wrecks, worn down. I mean, my poor wife going through all of that for that many hours. And then we found out the baby was distressed, and so we had to have an emergency C-section. Now, this is the point where I should admit to you that I'm not particularly fond of major surgeries. If given the option, I like to be put out entirely. And now I was being gowned up and masked in order to go into the emergency surgery room to do an emergency C-section on my wife. And so I tried to pay a lot of attention to her face and not what was happening otherwise in the room. And even at that, it's still a bit of a queasy experience for me. It is striking that when they announce an emergency C-section, they pretty much can get it done in about 15 minutes. And sure enough, 15 minutes after we wheeled into the operating or the surgery room, our first was born. Ian. Now, they had to take Ian away immediately because he was distressed, and they had to run a couple of quick checks, and they started sewing Sue back up, and I was kind of continuing to pay a lot of attention to her face, and they brought the baby back, but because they were still operating on Sue at the point, I got to hold our child first. And so they handed me our newborn. And I have to say, I had a profound experience of love at that point. My heart literally leapt out of my chest and connected to this little one. I cared so deeply. I started weeping for joy. That wasn't part of my traditional upbringing. Men don't cry. I was bawling. I was so immediately in love with this little one. And I got to carry Ian out to the waiting room where my mom and my sisters and a number of our friends were all waiting. And just, I couldn't say anything for the love and the joy that I had. I just sort of indicated that, yes, that here was our little one, and continued to bawl with love and joy. I learned that day that all of us have an inherent ability to love, and it can be so powerful and profound. And for parents with children, there's just an immediacy of that connection. So as Jesus calls Yahweh, God, Abba, Father, this is shocking and revolutionary and profound. Jesus is saying that in heaven, we have the perfect Father. The one that really does meet our needs. This is a theme of Jesus throughout scriptures. You see it in the very famous, the prodigal son, where this scoundrel of the son who has done absolutely everything wrong, including blowing through half the inheritance in the family, returns, and the father runs to embrace him. Again, something that a man in Jesus' day, especially a wealthy, prominent man, does not do. Runs to the father, throws his arms around him, and welcomes him back into the household. Even though the son is just asking for a job, the father is bringing him right back into the center of the family. This is our God, our Father in heaven. In like manner, when the older son pouts out on the back porch because of all the fuss being made over his younger brother, the father leaves the party and goes and begs the son to come and join the family celebration. Our Father longs for everyone to be a part of the family and a part of the celebration and worship. In another place, Jesus says, even you as fathers, when your son asks for a loaf of bread, you don't give him a rock. If we, failed, sinful, fallen, give good things to our children, how much more so does the Father in heaven give good gifts to the children? Now, ultimately, what we want from our father, from our mother, from parents, from people who are in positions of authority, what we want three things from them. We want them to love us. We want them to be wise, to know what it is that we need. And we want them to be powerful, to be able to accomplish what they set out to do. So do they know us? Do they care? And are they able? That's what we're longing for in someone in authority. The good news of the gospel is that person in ultimate authority, God the Father, is a loving Father who knows everything and is all powerful. And he is inviting us to be his children, to come into the family and to join in the celebration of the kingdom of God. I feel like in the midst of the trouble that we have, the difficulties that we are facing, it is incredibly helpful to be reminded of our good Father in heaven, our Father in heaven. And also that people around us desperately need to hear that there is a God in heaven who loves them, who knows them, and is able to help to save them. And so we have an opportunity through Jesus to share our Father with the world. And so I would invite you this season of difficulty that we have to hold on tightly to our God in heaven and to share him with the people around us who so desperately need to hear from him. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and I look forward to sharing with you other reflections here from the Lord's Prayer.
Dr. Al, thank you so much for that message. And as we finish today's devotional, what we want to do is leave you with that one simple step that you could do to effectively introduce someone to Jesus. And so this week, what we want you to do is identify one person who you know that doesn't know Christ and to ask God to show you what he thinks about that person and how much he loves that person. And then this week, just begin to pray for that person, that God would begin to develop whatever he needs to in their life, so that as we continue on in these next coming weeks, that you can actually introduce that person to Jesus. So this week, what we want you to do is just begin to pray for one person that you know that doesn't know Christ and ask God to give you a heart for them. Remember, this is just part one of a 4-part series from Dr. Al, and so stay tuned next week for part 2. We're so thankful that you joined us today. God bless and have an amazing week.